Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Senior Vice President, Corporate Strategy at Workday, Leanne Levensaler.
Thank you for being here. We're delighted to have you. This session is really born out of somewhat of a passion project for many of us in strategy and in our communications team. Workday, I think many of you know, we're deeply committed to workforce development, and we're also deeply committed to collaboration with our customers and the wider ecosystem on how we might solve some of the most vexing challenges we have with, helping our economy, helping our individuals connect with opportunity. So this session is really just sort of born out of that commitment and that passion. As employers, your skill needs are continuously shifting, right, in response to incredible competitive pressure, the industry changes, all your industries are being disrupted digitally, right? We're all changing. No one's immune to digital transformation now, regardless of your industry. And also the business model changes that come along with that. And in order to ensure that you can actually deliver on your business strategy, you actually can grow your organization or make the changes you need to do, you need to have a ready now workforce. You need to prepare your workforce. Most companies are really struggling, frankly, that we talk with, and I'm sure you have the similar experience, about how do you create that rich culture of learning, that rich culture of opportunity in your organization? How do you ensure that you are preparing people for their current jobs, but also their next jobs at the same time? Is that a challenge that you all are facing in your organization? A lot of head nodding here, too, yes. And so what we wanted to do is create the space today to have a really rich conversation about company that's doing an excellent job out of it, what we're learning, what we're seeing more broadly of some success stories on market, and we have some deep experts here today to share that with you. But before we get started, I just wanted to give you a little bit of a glimpse into some of the research that we did earlier this year. Workday and Bloomberg Next commissioned a study, a survey. We surveyed 200 leaders in both business and academia, just asking them about the challenges they're having or asking them about how they're dealing with workforce preparedness and the widening skills gap, and maybe what are some of the ways we can improve the situation. So we learned a lot. It was a comprehensive survey. Some of the information here is here on the screen about the respondents, the affiliations, the demographics, if you will, of the report. The final report, which is made available in a white paper that we have on our website if you're interested in checking that out, really uncovered several significant issues. Chief among them was really about the lack of collaboration between academia and corporations and business, what we can do more there, but also uncovered a lack of soft skills and a lack of budget for training. So I think that might resonate with many of you. Today we picked a few interesting data points to share before we bring the panel up to engage in the discussion, just to kind of set as a backdrop for what we're going to be talking about here today. So growing your own is so important, particularly in the booming economy. Turnover trends are high. We have unemployment, 3.9% unemployment right now. So turnover tends to trend high when unemployment drops. We can't find the skills we need, so it's imperative that we invest in our talent that we have, and we reinvest in those folks for their next opportunity, and we start now. We need to keep them engaged, we need to keep them productive so they don't leave us to go to our competition or to seek out elsewhere some other company that's going to be willing to invest in them in that way. One other thing we found is that only 1/3 to 1/2 have no formal plan in place to prepare their future workforces. And since we don't have, thousands of people in this room, I'd like to see by a show of hands, how many of you feel that your organization actually has a formal plan to prepare your future workforce? Just a couple, right? Thank you, yeah. So we're going to have open Q&A later. Maybe you can give us a little glimpse into what you're doing so we can all learn. But this is a real challenge for organizations. Also, we found, and it's not in this data set, but that budgets, the need is going up and the budgets are getting lower for formal training programs. Isn't that incredible? You say your talent is the most important thing. You got to change your skill mix for the future, because of the industry pressure. It just seems almost egregious from a strategy perspective that companies aren't investing more heavily. Now, there are exceptions, of course, and we're going to hear about those great success stories so we can learn and grow from them. But it just seems that those stats are really off. So the other interesting thing we found in the survey from the results was that, as I mentioned earlier, that there's just not the kind of collaboration that we think could be really impactful for the ecosystem between corporations or businesses and academia. There's just so much to benefit from deepening our collaboration with each other. Only 30% of corporations cite any kind of formal program or example of engaging with academia. 39% of educators collaborate on reskilling. So much opportunity for us, and hopefully we can get to some great examples here today from our panel and from you all. We found that the factor, that learning, was just so important for us as Workday to say, can we be a conduit? Can we help bridge that gap and get these groups talking? That in May, we convened a group of 100 leaders in the Bloomberg Next offices in New York City to just have this conversation and talk with each other. It was a really powerful day. One of the most impactful sessions for me personally, which is why we're here today, was a session that we had with our panelists. So we're doing a little reprise. This is a little opportunity for you to get a glimpse into what we experienced that day. So today we have Jamie Fall and John Kaplan with us. So to do a quick little introduction, Jamie Fall is the director of Upskill America from the Aspen Institute. I want to make sure I get this credential him right because he has such a fantastic background. He has almost 25 years in various leadership positions in workforce development. Served as a Deputy Secretary, Employment and Workforce Development for the California Labor and Workforce Development Agency. And as a Senate-confirmed leader in the Schwarzenegger administration, he provided policy and guidance to California's $11 billion workforce system and nearly 9,000 employees. We're also joined by John Kaplan. He is the Vice President of Training and Development for Discover Financial Services. He started his career as a teacher in inner-city Oakland, teaching economics and government to high school seniors. Bless your heart. He also has a bachelor's in international relations and a master's of international policy from Stanford and an MBA from the Haas School at UC Berkeley. So I'd like to welcome Jamie and John to the stage for a conversation. Thank you. Thank you all for joining me today. The last time they presented, I wasn't with them. I was just an audience member, so it's a joy for me to spend time with you all today. So, Jamie, we'll start with you. Given what we're hearing about today's strong economy and low unemployment rates, what are the current state of skills in this country as it relates to employers?
Great. So let me just begin by saying there are some very encouraging signs going on in the economy, right? Employers have a lot to be happy about. People with skills and a good education have a lot that they can be happy about as well. But yet there are a lot of pain points in the economy as well. And certainly I would start with talking about people with frontline and entry-level jobs who maybe don't have a college degree yet or a certificate or verified skills that are really struggling now. And even though the unemployment rate's low, their wages probably have seen a very small, if any, increase. And also on the employer side, you have a lot of employers really struggling to fill those skill needs that they have. And especially if it's something that's more technical or even soft skills now, those are two areas that employers are struggling with.
Yeah, absolutely. And what is your role with the Aspen Institute, or Aspen Institute's role? How is the Aspen Institute getting involved in this movement for reskilling?
So we work at Upskill America, we work directly with employers, and we work with them to really think about the types of education, training, and development that they can provide their employees so that they can have the skills that they need in order to be able to advance in the workplace. So all of our work is specifically employer-facing and really targeting how they can help those people who are part of their companies or even prospective employees.
Can you share some examples of working with employers today and what some of the programs programs that they're taking on?
Sure. Well, we look at a whole range of things. We look at everything from pre-employment training all the way to apprenticeship programs, certification programs, high school completion programs, all the way up to college degree programs.
That's great. And John, from the corporate perspective, so at Discover Financial Services, what are you seeing with regards to the skills challenge there in your situation?
So I think the skills challenge, I mean, there are many different levels of this. We hire people in lots of different areas. I mean, we're a big company, 17,000 people. We operate primarily in the US, but we do have some global operations as well. We run 4 big call centers in the United States, in Phoenix, Salt Lake City, Columbus, Ohio, and Newcastle, Delaware. And it's imperative for us that we have energetic, highly knowledgeable call center agents. I mean, we don't play in the subprime space when it comes to our financial products. We play in the prime space. And we have customers that are very demanding, and we have to have highly skilled agents to meet the needs of our customers. And I think it's a challenge to get people who are willing to come to Discover or any call center environment in the United States and take 100 calls a day. It's a tough job. And you know, when it comes to the work that we've been doing with the Aspen Institute and Jamie, we've really tried to solve that problem. How do we acquire skills to come be the face of Discover to our customers?
And so you all have internal programs that you're pursuing, but you have a college tuition program. Can you tell us a little bit more about that college tuition program?
Sure. So we've had a tuition reimbursement program for as long as anyone can remember, and I think it probably was about 3 years ago that the person who ran the program left, and the program ended up on my desk. And I was really gratified to have an opportunity to run this program, because I saw just very close up what the benefits of our tuition reimbursement program were. I actually reported to a guy who started as a call center agent and worked his way up to a vice president entirely because the company invested in him. And so I heard all day long, we have a lot of trainers in my department who are 2 years removed from answering phone calls, and they would continually, I just heard it all the time, you know, tuition reimbursement is an amazing opportunity for us. But I also heard about the challenges that having a call center employee shell out several $1,000s for tuition and then wait to get it reimbursed is a huge challenge for them. I mean, it's just, there's a cash flow problem. I mean, we heard there were opportunities with, you know, if your parent didn't go to college, it's really hard to select the right program for you. And our employees didn't always select highly impactful programs. So we spent 3 years working on this, and in May we rolled out a free college program. So if you come to Discover, day one of employment, you can enter into one of 7 highly impactful bachelor's degrees. They're online. They are in subjects that we think are uniquely beneficial to the company, and we will pay all of your tuition, required fees, books, supplies, and if we actually pay more than the maximum allowable shelter on your tax returns, we will provide a gross up to make sure that you pay nothing out of pocket.
Yeah, isn't that fantastic? Yeah, and quite possibly a slight plug for one of our ventures portfolio companies. I also co-head Workday Ventures, and we made an investment in Guild Education, which I know powers your program. So maybe talk a little bit about Guild Education, because Workday has been so attracted to this offering, this solution. Actually, the leadership team at Guild is here as well. To ensure that you can run these programs at a scalable way, at a high-touch way, but really leveraging the best of technology in this ecosystem that they supported. So maybe share a little bit about the underpinnings.
Yeah, so actually, Jamie actually introduced me to Guild Education. So as it turned out, we had decided we were going to go down this path, and we were going to start college program, and whether it was going to be free or mostly free, we hadn't really decided. But right about the time we had launched 2 separate RFPs, one to find a university that we could partner with to build the right degrees for Discover, and one to outsource our tuition administration. And tuition administration is it's difficult to do, it's time consuming, there are a lot of compliance issues with it. We just didn't think we should be in the business of that. So we have these 2 RFPs running, and we're actually getting very close to selecting selecting a university and a tuition processing vendor. And just about then, Chipotle launched a degree program for the restaurant workers. I don't know if anyone's read about it, but it's a wonderful degree program. They provide an enormous amount of college credit for the training that they provide to their employees and for the work experience. And so I called Jamie as soon as I saw that, and I said, Jamie, can you introduce me to the people at Chipotle who started the degree? And actually, Jamie, I've relied on him quite a bit throughout the years. He's introduced me to people at JetBlue and Daimler Chrysler and Cigna, all these companies that have really impactful education assistance programs. And Jamie, for the first time, said, I actually don't know the people at Chipotle, but I do know the people who started at Guild Education. And so within a week or so, I talked to Rachel Carlson on the phone, the CEO of Guild Education, and it just seemed like a perfect match for us. So to the disappointment of the vendors and the universities that we had already started this RFP with, we put Guild into the process, and it was only about a month until we just went through all the formal process and selected them. And we've been just delighted with our partnership since then.
That's great.
Leanne, I might add, that's one of the things that we probably hear from employers the most, is that they really don't know where to begin this process. Right. And the other, I think the best advice that any employer has given when I was in the room is just get help. Mm-hmm. There are people that do this all day, every day. It's what they do for a living. They know this incredibly well. If that's not what you do as a company, then get the help that you need to do this.
And considering budgets are so constrained, well, budgets are always constrained in any context, but budgets are so constrained, make sure you're using your highest leverage opportunities with your dollars, right? And so ensuring this most effective and efficient use of the funds, I think that's incredibly important, given what we know about from our surveying the state of budgets there as well. So can you talk a little bit about results? Or you're seeing some results come in, or is it early days still?
So, I mean, at this point, the results are really have to do with the feedback we hear from our employees and the number of participants that have enrolled in college. And so, we launched the program in May, in late May, and since that time, we've registered about 500 people have started college. And I mean, that's
amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. And we believe our goal is to get to 1,500, and we think that this is we're going to overshoot our goal.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if John actually said this, but you rolled it out in June, right? I mean, we're talking a very short period of time that this has been rolled out.
Yeah, so we rolled it out internally at the end of May, and then we did a press release and rolled it out externally in June. It was just the experience of rolling it out. We rolled it out at an all-company meeting, so 5,000 people sitting in the room, and 5,000 people on the phone, and there was just an audible gasp when we rolled it out, and just one person after another during the Q&A period raised their hand and just say, I don't have a question, I just think this is great.
Well, it's life-changing, right? Frankly, it's changing people's lives, which is spectacular. So of all the goodness, what are some of the barriers or some of the, maybe of some of the challenges you faced getting to that place, right? Because if people are in the audience here saying, I'd like to do some similar program at our organization, what's ahead of me here?
So I think there were barriers, maybe the most interesting barriers were the barriers that existed that we didn't see, and then the barriers that we thought were there that actually weren't there. Mm-hmm. So the barriers that we didn't realize we had was actually partnering with universities. It's really difficult to partner with universities. It's just culturally different. It's just the processes around universities are very different, and that's where our partnership with Guild has been so helpful. I mean, we don't actually, when we went and we selected 3 different universities for the Discover College commitment: Brandman University, Wilmington University, and University of Florida Online. we talked to people at the university, but the whole selection process was managed by Guild, and that was something, in retrospect, we didn't really know how hard it is to select the right universities, and they provided all that expertise. So that was a barrier that we didn't quite realize, and we were very happy to have great partners with us to help us through that. There was a barrier that we thought we had that in reality wasn't there, and it had to do with executive sponsorship. So we sort of thought, gosh, we have to run the numbers and we have to prove this 7 different ways what the ROI is. And we did that. And at the end of the day, I think there were a lot of people in the C-suite who were just looking for an excuse to say yes. And once we modeled everything out, and we had my boss said, let's go to finance, let's run our models through the finance department and make sure they're legit, and got the stamp of approval. And honestly, I think I could have done it on a napkin in retrospect, just for our numbers. So.
Yeah, well, I think the point that you made earlier about how difficult it is to partner with universities. Again, we saw that in the data from the surveys I shared. Only 30% of corporations actually partner with academia or educational institutions for these kind of programs of workforce development in their organizations, and 39% of academia said they partner. But what we heard actually when we convened everyone is there's just such a strong desire by both sides to connect and to collaborate. I mean, it was incredible. Like, we had at one university say, well, we're open for business. Any company that wants to work with us, we're going to help. We'll help prepare you for the future. Tell us your skill needs. And then it's interesting because then you heard the corporations, the different companies represented there saying, I don't know what my skills needs are the future. Can the university help me? Can their fellows, their researchers help me figure out what the skill mix is that I'm going to need? So it's just this interesting conversation that we were having all day long about there's desire on both sides of the marketplace, if you will. So I think finding solutions that can broker that and manage that infrastructure for you are especially important. So in terms of guidance, how do people take the first step? In your opinion on this?
So I think the first step is to try and figure out what your employees need and what they're currently doing. And we spent a lot of time listening to our employees, and we found out that there were a couple big barriers. One was the tuition, having them pay their tuition out of pocket. Another one was that they didn't have the resident experience to actually pick an impactful college degree program. And so we've tried to solve problems like that through this program. But I think the place to start with is just getting a sense of what your employees need. I think to the extent that you can link your work to the company's strategic imperatives, I think that's always really helpful. And I think that's actually not a particularly difficult thing to do right now, because we know that as the economy changes with increased automation and AI and machine learning, that the nature of the work is going to continue to get more and more difficult for employees. And if you have any hope of preparing your employees for those kind of jobs, you have to start now. Mm-hmm. You have to start yesterday, actually.
Yes. And Jamie, do you think that, let's say the economy, unemployment starts to raise and turnover starts to lower, do you think that these programs would be as successful in organizations, reskilling programs, college tuition programs, ways to do workforce development, support workforce development? Do you think we run the risk of this being a sort of an economic cycle kind of trend?
Well, absolutely, we run that risk, right? But it's going to get back to the company's long-term commitment to their employees and to their own success. Mm-hmm. What's not going to go away is the pace of change and the increasing use of technology, the need for the skills that employers have. They need to really get these systems in place now while the economy is going, well.
That's right.
So they can withstand, any economic downturn that's coming, because right now is the time they need to be figuring out what it means to have a learning culture within their company. What programs do they need in place to be building the skills of their workers? How important are certifications and college degree to their future workforce? And that pressure is not going to go away regardless of what happens with the economy, and they may be in under pressure to cut their training budgets or their education budgets in the future if the economy would turn south. And it's really important for them to understand what the benefits of those programs are right now.
Right.
Yeah, just to add to that, I've been asked quite a bit, did you roll this out because unemployment is at 3.9%? And the answer is no. I mean, we would have rolled this out with unemployment at 8 or 9%. I mean, this is part of our talent strategy. We believe that it helps us acquire the best talent. We believe that it helps us retain the best talent. But at the end of the day, we believe that that it's advantageous to us to invest in our own employees, and we've invested in our own employees in lots of different ways. This is just a very highly impactful way that actually leaves the employee with sort of the key to the middle class in the United States. And that's something, we come at this from a place of, if we can serve our shareholders as well as our employees and the communities in which we operate. I mean, this is one of those few triple wins that you can have in the corporate environment where you just make everyone happy.
Right. I mean, definitely an attractive aspect of coming to work at Discover Financial Services. But also, and I was just, talking with someone about this, and they were saying that employees perceive this as a benefit. And so you don't, even in different times, you don't take away benefits, do you? Right? Anybody ever try to take away an employee benefit? It's really hard, right? Really hard to take away an employee benefit. So I think there's that angle.
It's got this additional upside that you start attracting the type of people that are committed to their own development, and those are the type of people that can succeed in your company in the long run. Yeah. And so when we first did the analytics around our tuition reimbursement program, we found that our people who participate in tuition reimbursement were much less likely to have any absenteeism or to leave the company. They're much more likely to get promoted. And I think one of the very first questions we encountered was, well, aren't you encountering some degree of selection bias? The people who enter into these programs are more likely to be better employees.
Yes.
And I mean, the answer is, that's the point.
Yeah,
we want to be drawing these people into the company and investing in them because they're committed to their careers.
And you did see correlation with promotion rate, right? With these folks, the ability to get promoted through the organization, was that a higher promotion rate than others, or?
Yeah. So we actually were very fortunate that there was an event that I had a chance to meet Jamie at 3 years ago. Somewhere around 3 years ago.
April 2015.
April 2015. Very good
That's
memory.
A good friend. He knows exactly when y'all met.
So the Aspen Institute was one of the sponsors for the Upskill America initiative that happened out of the Obama administration. It was a combination of the Department of Commerce, Labor, and Education?
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
And the National Economic Council.
Yeah.
And the National Economic Council. And so that's where Jamie and I met for the first time. And I actually also met some people at a wonderful private, not-for-profit philanthropic organization called the Lumina Foundation. Mm-hmm. And somehow I managed to convince them to come to Discover and do a deep dive data analysis on our tuition reimbursement program. That study is publicly available. It's on the Lumina Foundation website. And that's actually what was the conclusion of the study was that every dollar that we invest in tuition reimbursement gives us, returns that dollar plus another $1.44. Mm-hmm. And so, it just has enormous upside, and it's primarily on lowering attrition, lowering absenteeism, increasing promotion rates, et cetera. And having that information made the whole process much easier. So.
And now we're going to create a workforce scorecard on Workday to do that, right?
Great.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great.
So, Jamie, can you share with us some examples from other organizations that you work with? I know we did a little bit earlier. Maybe outside of college tuition reimbursement, I'll just call it generic, about upskilling, about furthering, developing out the workforce for the future skill needs the company has identified.
Yeah.
Anybody?
So I'd love to. There are all kinds of really interesting examples that I could talk to. I mean, there are companies like Boeing that spend $1 billion a year in the education, training, and development of their workers. But probably the kind of the modern era, if you will, of upskilling when this kind of became a bigger conversation in 2014, 2015. Probably the biggest first announcement was Starbucks and Arizona State University. I visit with them on a pretty regular basis, and I think what's interesting about their program is that it's not anywhere near the same program that it was when they rolled it out in 2014, and I think it just goes to speak to companies really needing to watch the results that they're getting from their programs and being able to change them, reinvent them, and make them programs that really work for their employees. We also, I think probably the biggest, most recent high-profile announcement was Walmart and their college tuition program, which they're also working with Guild as well. That's very interesting in that they asked the employees to pitch in $1 a day for their programs as well. Another area where we see a lot of momentum is what employers are doing around certifications. And there's a group called the National Coalition of Certification Centers that form partnerships with community colleges and employers. So companies like Chrysler can go in and have their certifications for auto technicians provided within a community college context. And some very kind of interesting and exciting work happening there. And again, that model is based on you have a broker who can form those relationships between the employer and the education providers, which again, we've touched on it already, is really very helpful and critical for many companies.
Yeah. And, we had an interesting conversation when we were doing our prep call for this, and we started talking about, are we trying to create with these programs, these companies, a culture of learning or a culture of opportunity? And I think just the conversation is interesting to have. I don't think we landed anywhere one specifically. I think we're trying to do both, right, in some ways. So maybe share your thoughts on that, kind of broadly as you look across so many different organizations, and then I'll ask John to reflect on it from Discover's perspective.
So I really focus because all of my work is employer facing, and I really talk about that culture of learning that they want to have in place. And the way that I've settled on that and why we use that terminology is that when you talk about opportunity, my concern there is that employers will think, okay, well, I have a goal that I need to hit, and then once I hit that goal, you don't really know what's going to happen. But culture of learning is really more of a continuous process that they want to get in place, and something that hopefully is never going to go away, that's something that they can improve on and continue to build on. So, that goes from everything to making programs attractive, that people can really take advantage of them, but then also really rewarding managers for developing the people underneath them, as well as really tracking who's taking advantage of these programs and then making sure that they're at least aware of advancement opportunities as they come open. And so anyway, that's a little bit of why I've kind of settled on the culture of learning approach, and I just want this to be something that's going to continue regardless of what happens, regardless of what goals are met around opportunity, which are equally important, but hopefully it won't go away then if there's a change in the economy.
Exactly. Just reflecting on it from Discover's perspective.
Well, we've been trying to create a culture of learning for a long time, honestly, and it just the longer we hack at this, the more I question whether or not we can do it. It's just what does it look like when it's there? I mean, for me, obviously I've spent my entire career in learning, and I love learning, but everyone doesn't necessarily love learning, and I think that the question is learning to what end? And it's actually, the way I think of it more is that if you can create a culture of opportunity where we see the best in the people who work with us and for us, and that we're constantly committed to their advancement, and if learning is part of that, that's great. If there are other things that help them advance and just be the best that they can be when they come to work, maybe that's great. But I would hate to see an environment in which the learning itself was disconnected from the outcome. And for most employees, the outcome is opportunity. I mean, that's really what they want. I think you know, it's easy. I've been in growing companies and I've been in contracting companies. It's a lot more fun to be in a growing company. I think everyone, you know, that's
Yeah.
more. It's been fun for me. It's really hard when the company is not growing to have a culture of opportunity. But I think it's all the more important to think about how do you create opportunity for your employees, even if you're staying the same size or contracting. And I think honestly, there are a lot of companies that are going to be contracting in the next 10 years as more roles become machine enabled, and they're just fewer. I mean, I think we see it in the financial services that the majority of our employees are there to answer customer questions. Well, we're making a lot more simple products. They're going to need a lot. They're going to generate a lot fewer questions, and we are going to deploy a set of algorithms that, you know, help ensure that we're proactively solving things before our customers see them and have to call in. And then when they call in, they'll be, you know, talking to the Siri of financial services call centers, right? And in that environment, I think it's all the more important to think about how you tie the value proposition to your employees, to the opportunity that you can provide.
You know, and whenever we go through these shifts, and obviously we're going through an unprecedented shift right now with digital transformation, but, you know, the new opportunities that are created, we can't see yet, the new kinds of jobs, the ways our jobs change and evolve, it's always hard to see now, but we know that happens. We know that more is going to come. You know, we'll just do different types of jobs. How are you, and then I'm interested in hearing more universally too, but how are you at Discover thinking about jobs shifting, not total obsolescence, right, but shifting roles and preparing employees for those shifting roles? Like now you're doing things that require a different level of skill set to be effective in your job that you might not have today or sort of have that muscle today.
Yeah, so I think the challenge when you talk about reskilling programs is really having a very clear understanding of the starting place and the ending place. And the problem is those are constantly shifting. And that's why I don't typically try to use the word reskilling very often. I use the term upskilling more because it's really hard to sort of say, we need X number of people in these roles and we're going to have to start now for 3 years from now, because maybe those roles aren't going to be the ones you need 3 years from now. And so one of the great things about our Discover College commitment is that we're really trying to help improve the transferable skills that are going to be usable in almost any job. And there we'll have specific talent programs that can try to focus at the margin on very specific skill area capabilities, you know, cybersecurity and marketing analytics. I don't know that we have a precise enough understanding of the big shifts in the labor market to really talk about reskilling large populations for jobs in the future. I just don't think we can see it with that much clarity.
Yeah, and so much of the work is really being done around soft skills and those enduring or durable skills for the long term that we know, regardless of the technology composition of any role, that we're going to need those soft or enduring skills. But we also know from our survey results that that's a huge gap and a huge opportunity for us too. Jamie, how do you see employers thinking about the shift and fully appreciating that we don't always know exactly what we're shifting toward? Yeah. How do you see them approaching that from your vantage point?
Well, I would certainly agree with what John said, that I think the employers that I talk to the most don't understand where this is going to end, right? Or what is ahead 10 years. They may have some ideas. They may know there are some specific roles in their company that are going to be changing, but just overall the company itself, no one really knows where it's going to end. The smart money is certainly on people working more with machines than being replaced by machines, other than some roles that probably won't be necessary. But employers really seem to be focused on how do we build the soft skills right now, so people are able to communicate with customers, to really have empathy toward the customers, work with customers, and be able to also work with the machines and do customization that a machine by itself can't really do.
Any in-house creative programs that you're seeing from any companies right now about that, about just sort of further developing those soft skills?
You have quite a few companies really investing, and a lot of companies really struggle with how do you develop
Exactly.
soft skills, right? How do you transfer communication skills to someone and have it stick? So
Yeah.
that's something that companies are really struggling with right now. I'm actually hesitant to hold up very many companies and
Yeah.
say this is really the shining example of who's doing it really well. I would say that I'm seeing some technology really helping companies, and there's some things, mobile-enabled things that are helping people learn language skills.
Absolutely.
That's very promising right now. Certainly some virtual reality training tools that are taking off and showing incredible results for training. Those are some of the real bright spots that I see right now.
That's right. And we made some investments in companies with Workday Ventures for coaching, leadership development, career coaching, democratizing that for the organization. One company, Better Up, some of you may know about it, it's one of our portfolio companies, as well as Landit for women for career development. Just to help with that, because we see the same, or we hear from you all that this is something everyone's asking around now. Who's doing it right? Who's doing it well that we can learn from. So hopefully technology can help us through that change to more soft skills, which is great.
I think the soft skills and the virtual reality is going to be a great combination, right?
Yeah.
Because that gives people, and we're already seeing huge advancements in foreign language training in some colleges. There's some work going on in that right now with IBM in upstate New York that's showing incredible examples of people who can actually be in the foreign country practicing the language, and the same thing goes
Like
for
an
the soft
immersion.
skills, right? What happens in the workplace that you can recreate workplace environment that you can't really do in a classroom. That's going to be far more effective.
Yeah, and Walmart, one of our other wonderful customers, they just launched a virtual reality training, or they've been doing it for a while, but they just announced their progress there. And it's everything from just building deep empathy with really frustrated customers to sort of the seasonal rush that you get, during the holiday season, to actually some safety issues, how to handle different situations. In their organization. They're having great success with that. So I think everybody should keep a watchful eye on what they're doing with virtual reality immersion training in there to help their people, from that perspective.
One thing we do know about the future is that our economy will increasingly reward people with really good learning skills. And that's something that I think, as learning professionals, that we have to take a step back and say, okay, are we training people to do this particular thing? And as we do it, can we ensure that they can be more effective learners at the end of this? Are we modeling the best learning practices in this particular training or this particular learning program? One of the things that I think our bachelor's program does is it helps our employees become much more independent learners. And that's something that's going to be critical in the future.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the future. If we look out 3 to 5 years, where do you see these types of initiatives going? Jamie, I'll ask you first.
Well, I guess I would start with, I think that's when we're really going to start seeing the companies that have taken this seriously now really separate themselves from the companies that aren't investing in their workers.
From that just corporate performance and best place to work.
Right. And actually, to one of John's really important earlier points I don't want to miss, in the type of people that are applying for jobs with a company. Like right now, a lot of companies can point to retention examples and say that this has been really positive around retention. But I think a few years out, we're going to see really important recruitment metrics as well. The quality of people that are applying, people that really want to make sure that they're working for a company that's going to invest in them. So I think in a few years, that's going to be one of the most promising and positive things for those of us that have kind of been in the field talking about this.
Yeah, absolutely. I would completely agree. And John, what do you say? 3 years to 5 years?
Oh, gosh.
How do you view the world?
So I think what I fear is going to happen is that there will be a massive shift in the labor force, and we're going to take a lot of people that are currently financially insecure, and we are going to put them in a position where they're no longer able to put food on the table for their families. And that, to me, is something that I find deeply distressing. And I don't see there being a clarion call to arms on this, that across all of American society, we should really be thinking about this. And that's one of the things that I'm so proud about working at Discover, is that, I think the future actually needs to be with employers providing this type of assistance to their employees. I spent 15 years in various capacities in the public sector and public education, and I am very skeptical that public education can solve this alone. I'm very skeptical that public education can reorganize itself according to the needs of American society as a whole. And I do think companies need to start doing this. I think they need to do it for their employees. I think they need to do it for the communities in which they operate. But it's such a win-win-win that it helps for your shareholders. I mean, these are programs that are going to drive increased value in the marketplace for Discover, and I really hope that more companies start doing things like this, because I think the nature of the American economy is incredibly cruel to people who do not have the skills to succeed. And as the bar goes up in the United States, there are more people who fall below into that category of people. And if you look at the opioid crisis in the United States is not, it is arguably, you could say that this is not a drug problem. This has to do with a society that the requirements for being gainfully employed continue to go up, and the education system has not kept pace. And one of the last, people self-medicate, and you could, this was to some extent, this was something that was foreseeable 15, 20 years ago. And so I think the solution to so many of society's ills is with corporations starting to invest in their employees in ways that they haven't historically. But the good news is that there's an enormous return for their shareholders.
Yeah, I think really well said. Well, thank you. I think now is a good time in our session to turn it over to you all and see what questions or maybe comments you want to add into the conversation here. We have a fairly intimate room, so we have some mic runners. So for Jamie or John, or just some comments about what you're doing at your organization that you may like to share. Are there any questions over? Oh, great. Thank you.
Hi, thanks. So I work for Keck Medicine of USC, and just kind of a shout out to USC. Their employees and dependents of employees can go to USC for free if they have the grades, which is great because my daughter chose UCLA. So, but my concern is not so much. It's because I'm seeing it with my kids. Kids now, millennials especially, are getting out of college with $120,000 in debt out of the gate. Are there loan repayment plans and programs that employers are putting in place that you've heard of? Because I think that, to me, I think that can burst the housing bubble. I think it can. There's so much that when these, right now I'll call them kids, are ready to buy houses, they're still going to be saddled with so much debt from college. What's going to happen to the economy at that point? Mm-hmm. So that's my question, is like loan repayment programs as opposed to educating people who don't have the degree. What about people who spent $120,000 to get the degree and they're sitting in a $60,000 a year job?
Mm-hmm.
Jamie, you want to take first crack at that?
Well, let me just say that I just put my oldest daughter in college, so thank you for that really scary thought. That's something that companies are certainly looking at, and there are some very positive things around it. Companies are taking it serious. There are some new programs that allow people to be able to, almost like a 401k, to be able to have some matching funds that go toward their their student loan debt. I mean, I don't have a good answer for you. All I can say is I'm busting my hump to make sure people don't have to compile that amount of college debt. You know, everything we can do to try to blur those lines between learning and working so they can actually get a valuable education, not some second-rate education through their employer. That's where we've got to take this, because the model as it is right now, and exactly to your point, or housing and other things, it's clearly not sustainable. And you know, that's where my focus is. I wish I could help the people that are saddled with those huge amounts of debt, and maybe we can get there, but let's just eliminate it prevent it for as many people as we can.
So from where I sit, I'll tell you the pros and the cons, you know, from a corporate perspective. So on the pros, it's actually a really cheap way to compensate employees. It turns out, you know, as an economist, I would have thought that if you're going to give an employee $1, put it in their paycheck, they would value that more than $1 invested in their student loan debt, because they have the optionality of using that dollar however they want. And the economist in me says that's going to be more valued. It turns out the economist in me was totally wrong. If you actually talk to people, they value the dollar put towards their student loans at about, I think what I saw as a study saying they value it at about every dollar at about $1.28. So, you know, the more you can help compensate people through their student loans, it's just a really efficient way to compensate people. And they prefer it because they don't have they don't have to make the decision, which takes energy and time and is painful. So the other good thing about college loan repayment is it's a great diversity and inclusion play. So African Americans, Latinos have vastly more student loan debt than white Americans. If you can hook it to your D&I program, you know, you can really actually have a differential effect of hiring highly skilled, diverse candidates, which maybe you wouldn't be able to.
But you bring up another good point is, you know, we had that conversation when we were all together at the Bloomberg and Workday event this summer. Are we over-credentialing? Are we, and I think yes, the answer is yes, we're over-credentialing, but are we asking for degrees when degrees are not necessary for it to do the work? So we get people in a situation where they have to, you know, have the kind of student loan debt to get into the marketplace. And so that's another thing that we can do, you know, as employers, is really inspect our job profiles and really try to understand at a very detailed level how necessary is a degree, and be very vocal and very brave and market like many companies are doing now. They're coming out and saying, we are not going to require degrees for these roles, right? And that's going to attract a lot more talent too. Yeah. That's a good one. Any other questions that we have in here? Great. Or comments too. Contributions to the dialogue.
I'd just like to hear a little bit more about the way you're designating the degree type. For instance, my company has a very large call center, but the call center's environment is probably shrinking because of technology. On the other hand, we can't find enough engineers. So are you suggesting that we approach call center employees who don't have a degree and say, we'll guarantee you an engineering degree at the end of your, at the end of your studies, you'll have a job? Or are you looking at it that sort of drastically between the roles, or are you just saying upskilling within the call center environment so that you're a better call center employee?
So yes, and. So we chose 7 different degrees, and we really chose them based on a combination of what we thought employees would value the most and what could provide the most benefit for the company. There were some areas that we don't have covered right now because we just couldn't find universities that provided high quality degrees in those areas. So I think of all, let's see, we have 7 degrees. I believe 3 of them are bachelors in business administration. So pretty fungible degree. 1 of them is in organizational management. 1 of them is in cybersecurity, and 1 of them is computer engineering. And I think that's only 6. So there must be 4 degrees in business. So, I don't know whether or not these programs are the solution to really reskilling employees for very specific job roles. And I think that's something that can be done probably more efficiently outside of the university system. I mean, there are companies that are set up that are designed entirely to do that work, and then you can very specifically say, well, if we want to make them computer engineers, well, what's our platform, what's our ecosystem, what technologies, and you can design it exactly for what you need. But by the time they get there, they better be good learners, and that's one of the things that a good bachelor's does. I was talking to some people just last week who said they had enormous luck with people with liberal arts degrees, converting them to engineers. It just turns out that the critical thinking, the communication, the basic decoding and encoding of the written language is incredibly important to making good computer engineers. And so what they're looking for is like, hey, can you give me 200 English majors, and I'll put them all through a computer engineering track for 9 weeks and see what we have. And they've had great luck doing that.
So I would just add to that, one of the most interesting models that I think exists in this area is probably what Toyota does. And they have a program called FAME that is centered in Kentucky, the example that I'm thinking of. And they really do a lot to help young people who are just out of high school go on and get a 2-year degree as well as advanced manufacturing training, and it's an apprenticeship model. So they end up with a job, or they throughout it they have a job and they're getting their education, and then they can choose whether they want to get a job with one of the 200 employers that they have involved now in the local area around advanced manufacturing, or they can go on and continue the model for a full engineering degree.
Fantastic program.
Yeah.
Great. We have time for one more question. Are there any more questions? All right. Well, I would just like to thank you all for spending time today and talking about your programs and what you're hearing in the market, you're sharing your expertise. And I invite you all to continue the dialogue beyond this session. Here is such an important workforce development is so important, not only to our own organizations as we've established up front, but also our society. So thank you all for being here today, and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.